This woman literally padlocked my driveway and told me I was trespassing on my own family's land. Worst move she could have made. I'd been gone 3 years and came back to find steel chains and a private community sign strangling the mountain road my great-grandfather carved in 1923. But here's what blew my mind. While I was away, 8 multi-million-dollar palaces had mushroomed like gaudy weeds in my clean valley. The crunch of gravel under my boots should have felt like home. Instead, that crisp pine I'd been dreaming about got smothered by some lady's overpowering designer perfume as she stepped out of her white Range Rover like she owned the ridge. Blonde bob, clipboard like a weapon, attitude sharper than shattered glass. Well, the hermit slinks back. This is private property now and you're trespassing. I kept my voice flat calm. Ma'am, that's my cabin up there. My family's held this land since 1923. Her smile could have frozen lava. Not anymore, it isn't. Here's what this HOA monarch didn't realize. I didn't just own that century-old cabin. I owned the mineral rights underneath every single one of her precious showpieces. What would you do if some HOA tyrant locked you out of your own place? Drop where you're watching from in the comments. I know plenty of you have HOA war stories. My name's Rowan Cutter. Row to anyone not trying to hand me court papers. I'm 48, spent most of my adult life on oil rigs from Texas to North Dakota. The kind of work that makes your hands permanently grimy and your back holler by 40. But it paid the bills when life decided to boot me in the teeth. My great-grandfather homesteaded this valley in 1923. 320 acres of untouched Colorado wilderness, anchored by a hand-built log cabin tough enough to ride out nearly a century of mountain weather. That place wasn't just shelter, it was legacy. The spot where 3 generations of Cutters learned nobody owes you anything. And self-reliance isn't a slogan, it's survival. Then my mom got Alzheimer's. Suddenly, every paycheck was going to the best memory care unit in Denver, while I worked North Dakota's frack fields as she slowly forgot my name. The taste of petroleum still haunts my morning coffee, a daily reminder of what I gave up to buy her dignity at the end. The cabin sat empty, collecting dust and ghosts, while I collected paychecks in the frozen nowhere she passed 6 months ago. Peaceful, finally free. With the funeral done and my conscience at ease, I was ready to come home and remember how to be human again. Should have known it wouldn't be that clean. The valley waiting for me looked like a luxury catalog had puked on my childhood. Where wildflower meadows used to blaze, perfect sod lawns sprawled like plastic carpets. The chemical bite of fertilizer murdered the sweet mountain bloom. 8 glass and steel behemoths ruled the skyline. Each one worth more money than my family has seen in 3 generations. And reigning over this environmental eyesore like a bargain bin Disney villain was Lydia Ashcroft. Picture your worst HOA nightmare. Give her a Dallas real estate license and enough money to buy a small island. 54 years old, blonde bob sharp enough to cut glass and the kind of smile that calculates your net worth while pretending to ask about your day. Word around town was she'd swooped in 2 years ago through some shell outfit, snatched up parcels faster than a card shark with marked decks, then crowned herself Queen of Granite Ridge Estates. After our roadside meet ugly, Queen Lydia handed me a manila envelope thicker than a phone book. 47 separate violation notices for the cabin that predates her grandparents by half a century. Get this. Non-compliant roof color. Apparently, my great-grandfather's cedar shingles, weathered to a beautiful silver by decades of mountain storms, didn't match their architectural palette. Unauthorized outbuildings. That would be the 1920s root cellar that kept my family from starving during the Depression. Landscaping violations because apparently God's own wildflowers aren't on their approved list. The grand total? $73,500 plus $500 per day until I achieved compliance. But here's what really crawled under my skin. It wasn't just highway robbery wrapped in community standards. It was the way she said certain types with that tone that makes your jaw lock. The way her nose twitched when the wind carried the honest scent of work clothes, the quiet digs about transient lifestyles and questionable associations. This woman has never done a day of actual labor in her manicured life, yet somehow I was the neighborhood cancer threatening her precious comps. The paperwork gave me 30 days. Pay up or face a lien and foreclosure. 30 days to obey rules I'd never agreed to from an organization I'd never joined, over land my people owned before her parents were born. That evening, I drove my rattling F-250 to the county courthouse, diesel coughing like an old smoker. Barbara Quinn was locking up. She's been clerk there since the Carter years. "Roe Cutter," she said, smile mixing warmth with sympathy. "Welcome home, honey. I'm real sorry about your mom." After I thanked her, I asked about the HOA filings. Barbara's face shifted from friendly to funeral solemn. Lot of politics around that development. Things rushed through faster than a greased pig at the county fair. The HOA covenant packet filed just 18 months ago read like a tyrant's wish list. Page after page of legalese handing Lydia authority over everything from mailbox shades to how often you could have guests. But here's where it got spicy. My signature was nowhere on any of it, not once. Knowledge nugget. In Colorado, HOA covenants need unanimous consent from all affected owners to be binding. Takeaway: just because your neighbor signed doesn't mean you're automatically roped in. Always confirm your parcel is actually included in the recorded documents. Driving back under stars clearer than my legal picture, one question burned hot. How does a brand new HOA claim power over a century-old homestead they can't legally touch? What I didn't know then was that my family left me something better than an old cabin. A week later, I'm sipping morning coffee on the porch. Real coffee, not motor oil they pour at North Dakota truck stops, when the quiet gets shredded by the crunch of expensive tires on gravel. 3 vehicles creep up my driveway like a suburban invasion. Lydia's white Range Rover leads, flanked by 2 BMW SUVs stuffed with people who look like they got lost on the way to a country club. The cloud of cologne arrives before they do. I guess Mountain Air needs a designer upgrade. Lydia steps out in what can only be called an REI safari costume picked from the priciest rack. Designer hikers so pristine they've never met real dirt. Behind her, 3 other middle-agers in matching outfits clutch clipboards and cameras like they're documenting a disaster zone. "Morning, Mr. Cutter," she calls with a syrup so fake it rots teeth. "We're here for your mandatory architectural compliance inspection." I stay planted, savoring coffee that tastes like freedom. That's strange. I don't recall sending invitations. The HOA Architectural Review Committee has full authority to inspect all properties for covenant compliance, she announces, waving papers like a wand. Section 4.7 of the bylaws. Her little unit starts rapid-firing photos. My cabin, my truck, my woodpile, probably my morning stubble if they could zoom enough. Shutter clicks mix with whispers about structural deficiencies and aesthetic disasters. "Ma'am," I say, standing slow, "this is private property. You weren't invited, and you sure don't have permission to turn my home into your personal photo shoot." Her smile turns sharp. "Actually, we do. Section 4.7 clearly states, Section 4.7 of covenants I never signed," I cut in. "Documents that don't apply to land never legally included. Now, I'm asking you once, politely, to get off my place." Her face goes from pale to boiled lobster in 3 seconds. She corrals her committee back to their vehicles like an irritated camp counselor, but not before one parting shot through the window. "You'll regret this attitude, Mr. Cutter. We have ways of dealing with troublemakers who don't respect community standards." Next morning, my mailbox looks like a paper grenade detonated. 14 separate violation notices, each one decked out in official HOA letterhead and signed in Lydia's aggressive handwriting that looks like angry chicken scratch. Unpermitted structures. My great-grandfather's 1920s outhouse, now a charming historical relic, apparently violates modern setbacks. Improper vehicle storage. My F-250 in my own driveway fails their precious aesthetic test. Landscaping non-compliance. Wildflowers that have bloomed here since the Cretaceous aren't on their blessed list, but my personal favorite, unauthorized outdoor equipment storage. They're fining me for a splitting maul and a stack of firewood. Tools that kept my family warm for generations are now, apparently, threats to property values. Each violation carries a $500 hit with daily penalties until corrected. The paper cuts on my fingers feel like tiny victories as I sift their bureaucratic blitz. That's when I notice something that finally makes me grin. Mini twist. The metadata on their violation photos shows timestamps from 3 days before their so-called inspection. These clowns had been sneaking onto my land all week, photographing my home from every angle, prepping their paper assault like some suburban commando mission. Time for my counterpunch. Radio Shack still hangs on in small mountain towns. Bless their stubborn hearts. I spent the afternoon there buying a trail cam setup, 6 units with night vision, motion detection, and audio. Colorado's a one-party consent state, and this is my property, so every word they utter here belongs to me. Within 48 hours, I struck gold. The cameras caught Lydia and 2 committee members creeping around at dawn like budget ninjas, taking more photos and holding what looked like war room huddles right there on my ground. The audio is diner clear. We need documentation of every possible violation. Lydia's voice pops crisp. The more we stack, the faster we can pressure him into selling. What about environmental violations? One asks. Could we claim his septic is contaminating groundwater? Brilliant, Lydia purrs. I'll call county health tomorrow. Emergency contamination concerns always get immediate response. Knowledge nugget. Snapping pics of private property from public space is usually legal, but trespassing to gather evidence is a crime that can nuke any case built on it. Takeaway. Trail cams are worth their weight in gold when you're fighting HOA harassment. Bullies thrive in shadows. Drag them into daylight. Armed with video of their scheming, I had options. Call the sheriff, file harassment charges, lawyer up, go nuclear. Instead, I let them keep digging their own hole. 25 years on rigs teaches patience. When you work around machines that will kill you if you rush, you learn to think 3 moves ahead. Lydia was running on entitlement and emotion. I was playing chess while she fumbled with checkers. Right on cue, my phone rings the next morning. Ro, it's Evan Dalton from County Health. Got a complaint about septic violations at your place. Now, I know your granddad built things to last, but regulations mean I have to check. Evan, come up anytime. Bring the full kit. I want everything documented official-like. 3 hours later, Evan's shaking his head like he can't believe it. Son, your septic is cleaner than most brand new installs. Whoever filed this was either clueless or flat-out lying. I hand him a USB loaded with highlights from the trail cams. Evan, you'll find this fascinating, especially the part where they discuss filing false environmental reports. As his county truck disappears down the trail, I pour another cup of the good stuff and watch storm clouds stack over the valley. The air smells like rain and incoming justice. Lydia thought she was playing hardball. She had no idea the game had just changed completely. 2 days after Evan's visit, I'm splitting firewood behind the cabin when engines grind up the mountain again. Not the purr of luxury SUVs this time. The aggressive rumble of county trucks mixed with the whine of what sounds like a news van. 3 official rigs park in my drive. County Health, the building inspector, and a guy with a clipboard who introduces himself as a state environmental compliance officer. Behind them, a local TV crew is setting up cameras like they're expecting a disaster flick. Evan Dalton climbs out of the health truck looking mortified. Ro, I'm real sorry. We got 3 more complaints yesterday. Anonymous tips about immediate public health hazards and environmental contamination. State says I have to follow up with the full hazmat team. The building inspector, a thin fellow named Nolan Pierce, who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, starts shooting photos of my foundation. Someone reported structural instability and code violations that could affect neighboring properties. Meanwhile, the environmental officer, badge says Daniel Rivera, suits up like he's about to walk into Chernobyl. We've received reports of possible groundwater contamination, illegal septic discharge, and improper waste disposal. I can smell the setup a mile away. The timing's too neat, the accusations too synchronized. But what really burns is the news crew filming everything, making it look like my family's century-old homestead is some kind of toxic dump. Gentlemen, I say, keeping my voice level, I'd rather pitch someone down the slope. You're welcome to inspect whatever you need, but I'd appreciate knowing who filed these complaints. Evan shifts, uncomfortable. Anonymous tips Ro came through the state hotline. Mini twist. While they're staging their equipment, I spot something that spikes my blood pressure. The reporter is interviewing someone just off camera. I catch a flash of platinum hair and pristine outdoor boots. Lydia orchestrated this whole circus, media and all, to humiliate me and force a sale. Time for a little counterintelligence. I walk to where the reporter is wrapping her chat with Lydia, who's wearing a concerned citizen mask that wouldn't fool anyone who's met her. "Excuse me," I say, polite. "I'm Rowan Cutter, the property owner. Since you're covering this, I've got information your viewers might want." The reporter, young, eager, hunting a scoop, brightens immediately. "Of course, Mr. Cutter. What should people know?" I hold up my phone and show a screenshot from my trail cams. "Well, they should know the person who just spoke with you has been trespassing on my land for weeks, secretly photographing my home, and I've got video of her discussing filing false reports with county agencies." Lydia's face goes white, then red, then something close to purple. You can't. This is harassment." "Ma'am," the reporter says, suddenly laser-focused, "are you saying you have documented evidence of the complainant trespassing and talking about false reports?" Before I can reply, Evan calls from behind the cabin. "Ro, you better see this. The hazmat team's instruments surround my septic. Rivera holds an electronic detector that should be squealing if there's contamination. Instead, it's as quiet as snowfall." "Mr. Cutter," Rivera says, peeling off his mask, "I've never seen readings this clean. Your system isn't just compliant. It exceeds environmental standards by a wide margin. Whoever reported contamination was either wildly misinformed or deliberately lying." Pierce, the inspector, looks just as puzzled. "Sir, I've done this 15 years. Your foundation, granite and steel, would meet modern earthquake specs. These reports claimed imminent collapse, but this building could probably shrug off a bomb." Vindication tastes sweeter than my coffee, but I'm not done. "Gentlemen, if you're after actual environmental violations, you might want to test runoff from those new mansions down valley. I've noticed odd discoloration in the creek after heavy rain." Knowledge nugget. Anonymous complaints to agencies can be traced through public records requests, and filing false environmental reports is a federal crime with teeth. Takeaway. When facing coordinated harassment through government channels, document everything and remember false reporting can backfire harder than they expect. While the teams pack their gear, the reporter corners me for a longer interview. I hand over selected trail cam clips, walk her through the harassment timeline, and suggest she look into the lightning-fast approvals for Granite Ridge. "This is quite a story, Mr. Cutter. Mind if we do a follow-up on HOA overreach and intimidation?" "Ma'am, I'd be honored, but maybe vet your sources more carefully next time before showing up with hazmat suits." As the official convoy rolls out, I notice Lydia by her rover, whisper shouting into her phone. The wind carries fragments, damage control, legal options, and this wasn't supposed to happen. The environmental officer stops by my porch before leaving. "Mr. Cutter, off the record, you might want to know we've seen similar false report patterns in Texas and Florida. Same playbook. Anonymous tips, coordinated timing, always targeting folks feuding with certain HOA management outfits. Interesting. Very interesting." That evening, I dig into Lydia Ashcroft's background and discover she's left a trail of suspicious property battles across 3 states. Each one follows the same blueprint: environmental complaints, harassment campaigns, and suspiciously cheap property acquisitions. The puzzle pieces start clicking together into a much uglier picture. But if Lydia wants to fight dirty, she's picked the wrong man. I spent decades in an industry where cutting corners can kill you. She's about to learn what real due diligence looks like. The next morning, I wake to find my power cut. Not storm damage, not a fuse. Someone called the electric company claiming hazardous violations required an emergency shutoff for public safety. The smell of kerosene from my lanterns drags up childhood camping memories. Except this isn't a vacation. I'm boiling coffee over a camp stove when my phone rings. An automated message from the power company informs me service is suspended, pending safety inspection and HOA approval for reconnection. HOA approval for electricity on my own land. I'm still processing that lunacy when a certified letter arrives, hand-delivered by a courier who looks like he'd rather be delivering subpoenas to mobsters. The envelope, thick as a novel, is printed on letterhead so expensive you can feel the money. Ashcroft Sterling Associates Real Estate Law. Inside are 47 pages of legal threats essentially saying, pay $250,000 in damages and compliance fees or we'll sue you into oblivion. They claim my non-compliance has destroyed community property values, and my hostile attitude constitutes intentional interference with business relations. I have 72 hours to respond. Not to pay, to respond. Subtext: hire expensive lawyers or get steamrolled. But here's the part that really insults me. The firm's senior partner is Rex Sterling, as in Rex Sterling, Lydia's husband. These people aren't just corrupt, they're comically blatant about it. Mini twist. While combing through their demands, I spot something that makes me smile for the first time all day. The lawsuit claims damages dating back to January 1st. But according to county records, I didn't even return to Colorado until March. They're claiming 6 months of damage from a guy who wasn't even here. Amateur hour. Time for a deeper research phase. I spend the day at the county library, where the Wi-Fi is better than my cabin's spotty signal. What I find in public records makes my oil rig days look like kindergarten. Lydia isn't just a suburban tyrant. She's been running this same scam across multiple states for nearly a decade. The pattern never changes. Buy land cheap through shell companies, rush permits with friendly officials, create a dictatorship HOA with herself in charge, harass holdouts into selling below market value, and resell for massive profit. Texas, 4 developments, 17 families forced out. Currently under investigation for fraud. Florida, 2 developments, 9 families, 1 federal lawsuit pending. Arizona, 3 developments, shut down by the state attorney general for racketeering. And now Colorado is her latest hunting ground. But here's where her team screwed up. They never checked the mineral rights history on my property. They were focused on surface ownership and HOA covenants, missing that my great-grandfather was sharper than they thought. The original 1923 homestead patent didn't just grant surface rights. It included mineral rights, water rights, and a perpetual access easement for mineral development. Legal language meaning, I have the right to access those minerals even if someone else owns the surface. Every one of those mansions is sitting on my mineral rights. Knowledge nugget. Mineral rights are separate from surface rights and often override HOA covenants, zoning laws, and even certain government regulations, thanks to federal mining laws dating back to the 1800s. Takeaway: in property fights, always research mineral, water rights, and easements. They often grant legal power modern restrictions can't touch. As I'm processing this bombshell, a text pings from Evan at County Health. Row, heads up. State Attorney General's office is asking about environmental complaints in our county. Specifically, patterns of false reporting. Interesting timing. That night, while I'm reading by kerosene light, I hear someone trying, and failing, to be quiet on my gravel. My trail cameras have night vision, but I don't need them to know I've got company. 3 figures in dark clothes are creeping around with spray paint cans and what smells like gasoline. It hits me. They're about to try burn down a cabin built from fire-resistant cedar during Colorado's wet season on property covered by cameras. I step onto the porch with a flashlight and my grandfather's old lever-action rifle. Not aimed, just visible. Evening, folks. Nice night for a walk. They freeze like deer in headlights. In the beam, I see 2 men and a woman in ski masks. Bargain bin bank robbers. Now, I'm going to count to 10, then call the sheriff. Think about whether what you're getting paid is worth felony arson charges. They drop everything and run like they're already on fire, stumbling toward what sounds like a car on the main road. They leave behind a gas can, 3 spray cans, a bag of road flares, and what looks like a timing device, evidence that's about to make Lydia's legal nightmare worse. I call Sheriff Manuel Ortega directly. We'd met during the false health complaint mess, and he struck me as a straight shooter who doesn't like his department used as a harassment tool. Row, what kind of trouble now? Sheriff, I just scared off 3 people about to commit arson. They left behind enough evidence to start a fireworks show. I'll be right there. Don't touch anything and keep that rifle handy. 20 minutes later, Ortega is photographing the abandoned arson gear while I show him the trail cam footage. Son, you just handed me enough to arrest someone for attempted arson, conspiracy, and probably RICO charges if we prove who hired them. As he loads the evidence into his patrol SUV, Ortega pauses, looking serious. Row, off the record, the FBI's been sniffing around property fraud schemes in Colorado. Seems someone's been running a harassment and acquisition racket that's caught federal eyes. The puzzle pieces keep dropping into place, and the image they form looks more and more like a federal prison sentence. But first, I've got a lawsuit to respond to. And after tonight, I think I've got some very interesting counterclaims to file. 3 days later, I'm in the office of Roxanne Hale, a property rights attorney in Colorado Springs who takes cases big firms won't touch. The place smells like old law books and strong coffee, the kind of office where real work gets done. "Mr. Cutter," she says, spreading a stack of documents thick enough to choke a horse. "You're not going to believe what my team found." She slides me a fat folder labeled Cutter Mineral Rights Historical Analysis. The first page is a photocopy of my great-grandfather's original 1923 homestead patent, stamped with federal seals and signed by names that belong in history books. "Your great-grandfather didn't just homestead 320 acres, Roxanne says, grinning like she's about to blow my mind. According to federal records, he filed claims on mineral rights covering 1,280 acres, the entire valley floor plus the ridgelines. I'm still trying to process that when she flips the page. Here's where it gets good. When your family sold parcels in the 1970s and 80s, they transferred surface rights only. The mineral rights stayed with the original patent, which means," she pauses dramatically, "you don't just own your cabin, Mr. Cutter. You own the mineral rights beneath every mansion in Granite Ridge Estates." The room hums quietly as I try to wrap my head around the implications. Roxanne drops the next bomb. Under federal mining law, mineral rights include reasonable surface access for extraction activities. That means you have legal authority to reach your minerals, even if someone else owns the surface. She slides me another document. A geological survey from the 1980s showing the valley sits atop significant rare earth element deposits, the kind used in electronics and renewable tech. "Mr. Cutter, based on current market prices, your mineral holdings could be worth $50 million to $200 million. I lean back, feeling like I've been hit with a sledgehammer made of good news. "So let me get this straight," I say slowly. "Lydia's been trying to steal property I legally own. Property sitting on mineral rights worth more than her whole development." "Exactly. And here's the kicker. Every building permit for those mansions should have required notification of mineral rights holders. That's federal law." Roxanne pulls another folder labeled Granite Ridge Development Permit Violations. None of the permits filed for Granite Ridge Estates included mineral rights notifications. None. Which means every single construction permit was issued illegally. The implications slam into me. So their entire development is built on illegally issued permits. Gets better. I pulled the financial records for Granite Ridge Estates LLC. Guess how much money moved through it in the last 2 years? I shake my head. $2.8 million in HOA fees and special assessments. But here's the kicker. Only $800,000 shows up as legitimate expenses. The other $2 million vanished into shell companies, owned by, she pauses, board members, relatives, and their businesses. My jaw drops. She's been embezzling $2 million. That's just what we can trace. The real number's likely higher. Roxanne leans forward, her tone serious. "Mr. Cutter, this isn't just an HOA dispute. This is organized fraud, racketeering, and potentially federal crimes. Mail fraud, wire fraud, and violations of federal mining law." She hands me one final document, a letter with FBI letterhead. "This morning, I contacted the federal task force investigating property fraud schemes in the Mountain West. Agent Patricia Reeves is very interested in speaking with you. Seems your situation matches a pattern they've been tracking across multiple states." I stare at the letter, trying to process everything. 6 months ago, I was just a guy trying to come home and heal. Now I'm sitting on mineral rights worth hundreds of millions, holding evidence of federal crimes, and holding the key to dismantling what looks like a multi-state criminal network. "Roxanne, what happens now?" She smiles like a predator that's found its prey. "Now, Mr. Cutter, we flip the tables. You're no longer the defendant in this story. You're the plaintiff, with enough legal firepower to destroy their entire operation." The taste of justice is sweeter than I imagined, but there's still work ahead. Step 1. File for an emergency injunction to freeze all HOA activities pending investigation into their legal authority. Step 2. Demand a full accounting of every dollar that's flowed through their organization. Step 3. Notify every homeowner that their property titles might be invalid because of permit violations. She pauses, letting that sink in. And step 4. Let Agent Reeves know you're ready to cooperate fully with the federal probe. I walk out of that office a different man than the one who walked in. The mountain air feels cleaner, the sun brighter, and for the first time in months, I'm not playing defense. Lydia Ashcroft thinks she's been hunting a wounded deer. She's about to learn she's been stalking a grizzly bear armed with mineral rights, federal law, and an army of investigators. Roxanne assembles what she calls a dream team, though it feels more like a strike force. Marcus Chen, an environmental lawyer who usually defends endangered species, jumps aboard when he hears about the illegal permits. Sarah Delgado, a financial crime specialist who quit the prosecutor's office because she was tired of plea deals for white-collar crooks. And Jake Morrison, a former FBI agent turned private investigator who specializes in multi-state fraud cases. First thing, Roxanne says over paint-stripping coffee, we document everything. Jake's coordinating with Agent Reeves while Sarah follows the money through Lydia's shell companies. Jake pulls up a laptop showing a digital map that looks like an epidemic chart. We've identified similar operations in Texas, Florida, Arizona, and New Mexico. Same playbook every time. Shell company purchases, lightning-fast permits, HOA harassment, forced property sales. The red pins spread across the map like a disease. Total estimated fraud across all sites. A conservative $12 million over 8 years. Marcus opens his laptop next, revealing satellite images of Granite Ridge Estates. Environmental violations are rampant. Illegal grading altered natural water flow. Several homes were built on floodplains without proper permits. And runoff from construction is polluting protected watersheds. Sarah spreads financial documents that look like chaos on paper. The shell company structure hides asset ownership and launders money. Lydia Ashcroft's real estate portfolio across 4 states is worth about $15 million, none of it traceable to legitimate income. I'm still processing when Roxanne drops the strategic bomb. We let the feds build their criminal case while we pursue civil remedies. Your mineral rights let us challenge every permit, every structure, every HOA action taken without proper notification. We can freeze their entire operation while the criminal case unfolds. She produces a thick legal filing. Emergency injunction against all HOA enforcement activities, filed this morning. Hearing is next week. Marcus chimes in. The EPA has opened a formal investigation based on our complaint. If they confirm violations, and they will, it could lead to cleanup orders and federal environmental charges. Knowledge nugget. Federal mining law requires mineral rights holders be notified before surface development. Violating that can void permits and require new environmental assessments. Takeaway. Subsurface rights often outrank local zoning, HOA covenants, and even state rules. Always check them when fighting property battles. Jake adds his own ace. The Community Intelligence Network. Ro, remember your neighbor Silas? Turns out he's not the only original resident with detailed records of HOA harassment. We've got 4 homeowners with documentation going back 2 years, plus 3 newcomers who realized they were defrauded after buying clouded titles. He slides a binder labeled Witness Statements and Evidence. 17 people willing to testify about harassment, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Add your trail cam footage, the financial records, and now federal support. Sarah opens another fresh folder, smelling like new ink and righteous fury. Civil lawsuit filed this afternoon. RICO charges against Lydia Ashcroft, Rex Sterling, and 12 co-conspirators across 4 states. We're seeking treble damages under racketeering statutes. She pauses for dramatic effect. If we win, they'll owe 3 times every dollar they stole, plus attorney fees, plus punitive damages. Roxanne leans back with a predator's smile. Conservative estimate, a $40 million judgment, total asset forfeiture, and prison sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. The room goes still except for the low hum of justice shifting gears. What about the innocent homeowners? I ask. Despite everything, I don't want families to lose homes because they trusted the wrong people. Marcus has that handled too. Title insurance claims plus a settlement fund created from seized assets. Every legitimate homeowner gets made whole, properties get remediated, and the valley gets permanent conservation protection. Jake closes his laptop with a decisive snap. Timeline. Emergency injunction hearing next week freezes HOA activities. FBI arrests likely within 30 days based on evidence quality. Civil trial in 6 months, though most defendants will settle once the indictments drop. I look around at these 4 people who chose to help a mountain hermit take on organized crime. And I feel something I haven't since my mother died. Hope, mixed with certainty that justice is coming. So, I ask, when do we start ruining their lives? Roxanne's smile could light a city. Mr. Cutter, we already have. The mountain breeze through her office window smells like pine and incoming victory. Somewhere in Denver, Lydia Ashcroft is probably planning her next harassment campaign, completely unaware that her entire criminal enterprise is about to implode under federal scrutiny and one very stubborn landowner. This is going to be fun. 2 weeks later, I'm watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold when the thump of helicopters breaks the silence. Not the occasional medevac or news chopper. These are federal birds, black, serious, circling the valley like mechanical vultures. By 8 a.m., Granite Ridge Estates looks like a crime scene. FBI vehicles, IRS criminal investigation vans, EPA enforcement trucks, and enough federal agents to invade a small country swarm the area. The smell of rotor wash mixes with pine as helicopters shuttle evidence teams. My phone explodes with texts from neighbors. Holy hell, Ro, what did you do? And FBI just arrested Lydia at her house. And news vans everywhere. They're calling it the biggest HOA fraud case in Colorado history. But the best message comes from Evan. Ro, Wade Thornfield just got perp walked out of the courthouse. Thought you'd want to know. Wade Thornfield, the county commissioner who fast-tracked all those illegal permits. Jake's investigation uncovered a paper trail of bribes, kickbacks, and what prosecutors call a conspiracy to defraud the U.S. government. Mini twist, while I'm watching the federal circus through binoculars, my trail cams catch something that makes me laugh out loud. Rex Sterling, Lydia's lawyer husband, is trying to sneak boxes labeled confidential legal files out the back door into a waiting car. The problem? The FBI has the property surrounded, and he's doing it in broad daylight on camera. Clear obstruction of justice. Amateur Hour, Part 2. My phone rings. It's Roxanne, calling from what sounds like a war room. Ro, you're not going to believe this. The raid turned up evidence of fraud schemes in 6 states, not 4. We're talking about a criminal operation that's been running over a decade. How bad? Conservative estimate, 43 families defrauded, $18 million stolen, and enough RICO charges to keep prosecutors busy for 5 years. Through my binoculars, I watch agents carrying out hard drives, boxes of financial records, and enough evidence to fill a library. The sight is more satisfying than my morning coffee, and that's saying something. But Lydia isn't going quietly. By afternoon, the local news is running her crisis management spin. Interviews with concerned residents, decrying government overreach and painting me as a dangerous loner manipulating federal agencies. The irony is so thick you could spread it on toast. But her media strategy has one fatal flaw. She doesn't know about the trail cam footage we haven't released yet. That evening, Jake calls with an update that makes my day. Ro, remember those 3 who tried to torch your cabin? One just got arrested trying to board a flight to Mexico with $50,000 in cash and a fake passport. Let me guess, he's talking. Like a parrot with a law degree. Turns out Lydia hired them through her cousin's security firm in Dallas. Same crew she's used for intimidation work in her other fraud operations across the Southwest. The dominoes keep falling. It gets better, Jake continues. His testimony places Lydia at the center of a conspiracy involving arson for hire, witness intimidation, bribery, and what the feds are calling domestic terrorism, using government agencies as weapons against citizens. That night, I'm reading by LED lantern. Still no power, but now it's by choice. When Sheriff Ortega pulls into my driveway with his lights off. Ro? He says quietly. Thought you should know. Federal marshals are setting up a security perimeter around the valley tonight. Agent Reeves thinks Lydia might try something desperate before they arrest all her associates. Desperate? How desperate? The kind that makes people do stupid things with explosives. He hands me a radio and a federal contact card. Direct line to FBI Tactical. If you see anything unusual, call immediately. As his cruiser disappears into the dark, I realize what started as a property dispute has turned into something far more dangerous. People facing life sentences sometimes decide they've got nothing to lose. The mountain air feels different now, charged with tension and the metallic tang of an oncoming storm. My trail cams have night vision. My grandfather's rifle is loaded. And somewhere below, federal agents are watching a community about to learn just how deep corruption can run in small places. But there's something else in the air too. The scent of justice closing in on people who thought they were untouchable. I settle into my porch chair, radio close, rifle across my knees. If Lydia wants to tack assault charges onto her growing list of felonies, she's welcome to try. The grizzly is awake and done being hunted. Around midnight, my trail cameras pick up movement on the access road. 3 vehicles, lights off, creeping toward the valley like they're planning something that requires darkness. Time to call in the cavalry. I key the radio and whisper, FBI command, this is Cutter. I've got 3 vehicles approaching the valley with lights off, moving tactical. You might want to check it out. The response is immediate. Copy, Cutter. Maintain position. Do not engage. Federal units moving to intercept. In the distance, I hear the faint thrum of helicopters spinning up. The final confrontation is about to begin. And this time, the good guys have backup. But the helicopters never arrive. By dawn, the 3 vehicles have vanished like ghosts, leaving me wondering if I imagined the whole thing. Agent Reeves calls at 7 a.m. with an explanation. Mr. Cutter, those vehicles you spotted were ours. Federal surveillance teams repositioning for today's operation. Thanks for the heads up, though. Shows our perimeter security's working. Today's operation. Final phase arrests. We're picking up the last of Lydia's associates, including out-of-state players trying to flee before we link them to the case. By noon, the news reports arrests in Texas, Florida, and Arizona, all tied to what they're calling the Granite Ridge fraud conspiracy. 17 people are in custody, with more expected. The financial crimes alone are staggering. $23 million in stolen HOA fees, fraudulent property transactions, and what prosecutors describe as the largest organized HOA fraud case in U.S. history. But Lydia Ashcroft is nowhere to be found. Mini twist. While agents round up her network, Lydia has completely unraveled. Jake's sources report she's calling in bomb threats to federal buildings, claiming she has explosive evidence that will expose a government conspiracy against her. The woman who spent months calling me unstable is now making terrorist threats. Her spiral peaks when she files a $100 million lawsuit against me, the FBI, the EPA, and unknown federal conspirators for malicious prosecution and destruction of legitimate business. The filing is 47 pages of paranoid rambling, like it was written by someone who's watched too many conspiracy documentaries. My favorite part? She claims I'm a federal agent provocateur, planted in the valley to destroy her development through illegal surveillance and environmental sabotage. Rex Sterling, her lawyer husband, refuses to represent her. Smart, since he's facing federal conspiracy charges himself. Lydia's forced to represent herself, which explains why her filings read more like a manifesto than a legal brief. Jake calls later with news that's both hilarious and chilling. Ro, you've got to hear this. Lydia's been calling county officials claiming she has proof of a federal conspiracy to steal her property. She's demanding they arrest you for treason against the state of Colorado. Please tell me they're not listening. Are you kidding? After federal agents arrested their commissioner for bribery, county officials won't even take her calls. But here's the concerning part. She's also been trying to hire private security firms to protect her constitutional rights and defend against federal tyranny. That afternoon, I noticed something that makes my stomach drop. Fresh tire tracks in the mud near my property line. Heavy vehicles came and went while I was in town getting supplies. My trail cameras should have caught something, but there's a 2-hour gap where they mysteriously malfunctioned. Professional jamming, which means Lydia has hired people who know their trade. I immediately call Agent Reeves. Agent Reeves, I think I've had visitors. My security system was jammed and there are fresh tire tracks from heavy vehicles. Mr. Cutter, we've been monitoring communications suggesting Mrs. Ashcroft has hired a private military contractor out of Arizona. Former special forces types who specialize in asset protection. That's corporate speak for intimidation and surveillance. And maybe worse. We're tracking them, but they're good at staying just inside legal lines. The next morning brings news that makes the situation even more surreal. Lydia has announced a press conference to declare she's seeking political asylum in Mexico, claiming persecution by the American Deep State Environmental Terrorism Complex. She's actually planning to flee the country rather than face charges. But her escape plan collapses when customs agents at Denver International arrest her, trying to board a private jet with 2 suitcases full of cash, gold coins, and bearer bonds worth about $3 million. The charges keep stacking: money laundering, tax evasion, attempting to flee prosecution, and unlawful export of monetary instruments. Knowledge nugget. Prosecutors can add charges for attempting to flee, and moving large amounts of undeclared cash or valuables across borders is a separate federal crime with mandatory minimum sentences. Takeaway: when facing federal charges, running only makes things worse. Flight signals guilt and adds years to any sentence. That night, Jake calls with the final update on Lydia's private contractors. Good news, Ro. The FBI raided their compound in Arizona this morning. Turns out they weren't just doing asset protection. They were smuggling weapons to cartel groups in Mexico. Your harassment case just helped the feds bust an international arms ring. I'm still absorbing that when he drops the best news of all. Lydia's in federal custody without bond. Rex Sterling is cooperating to avoid 20 years. Thornfield is pleading guilty and agreeing to testify about the bribery scheme. And those private contractors are facing federal weapons trafficking charges that carry life sentences. The taste of victory is sweeter than any morning coffee. But there's still one final act. Jake, when's the trial? There won't be one. Lydia's new court-appointed lawyer, since she can't afford private counsel anymore, is negotiating a plea deal. Prosecutors are offering 15 years in federal prison for full cooperation and asset forfeiture. 15 years. Lydia's 64. With the charges she's facing, 15 years is basically a life sentence, and she knows it. As I hang up and look out over the valley finally at peace, I realize justice isn't always swift. But sometimes, it's perfect. The Queen of Granite Ridge Estates is about to become inmate number something or other in a federal prison. Her criminal empire is dismantled, her assets seized, and her co-conspirators are lining up to betray one another. But the real victory isn't Lydia's downfall. It's what happens next: the healing, the rebuilding, and proving that sometimes the good guys do win. The federal courthouse in Denver looks like a fortress on sentencing day, ringed by news vans, FBI vehicles, and what seems like half the valley's population. The marble steps echo with the clatter of camera crews and reporters rehearsing their lines for what CNN is calling the HOA fraud trial of the century. I'm wearing the only good suit I own, the one I bought for my mother's funeral, and feel completely out of place among agents and media professionals. But Roxanne insists I be here for what she calls the final moment of justice. Inside, the air smells like old wood and nervous sweat. Federal Judge Patricia Williams presides with the kind of authority that makes grown men confess. The gallery is packed with victims from 6 states, federal agents, and more reporters than I can count. Lydia Ashcroft sits at the defendant's table, looking nothing like the ruthless HOA queen I first met. Gone is the perfectly styled villain in designer clothes and a predatory smile. In her place is a broken woman in an orange jumpsuit, gray roots showing, face hollow and defeated. Her court-appointed attorney, a weary public defender who clearly drew the short straw, stands to address the judge. Your Honor, my client accepts full responsibility for her actions and respectfully requests the court's mercy. Judge Williams is unmoved. She spent the morning reading victim impact statements from 43 families across 6 states, stories of destroyed lives, stolen savings, and communities torn apart. Mrs. Ashcroft, the judge begins, her voice heavy with authority, you stand convicted of operating a criminal enterprise that defrauded families of over $23 million. You weaponized homeowner associations to terrorize your neighbors, corrupted public officials, and, when faced with justice, hired criminals to intimidate witnesses and destroy evidence. Lydia tries to speak, but the judge cuts her off with a look that could freeze helium. You turned the American dream of homeownership into a nightmare. You preyed on elderly residents who trusted community leaders and corrupted the very institutions meant to protect property rights. The courtroom is silent except for the faint hum of ventilation and the scratch of reporters' pens. Agent Reeves leans over and whispers, "This is where it gets good." Judge Williams opens a thick folder and reads from Lydia's pre-sentencing report. The court notes that the defendant showed no remorse during her crime spree, no mercy to her victims, and no respect for the law even after arrest. The defendant's attempt to flee prosecution, her efforts to destroy evidence, and her hiring of criminal associates to intimidate witnesses demonstrate a complete lack of rehabilitation potential. She lets the weight of that hang in the air. Mrs. Ashcroft, this court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole, followed by 10 years of supervised probation. You will pay restitution in the amount of $69 million, representing treble damages under federal racketeering statutes. The number hits the courtroom like a thunderclap. $69 million. Lydia's face drains of color, then goes gray as she slumps in her chair like strings were cut. But Judge Williams isn't done. Additionally, all assets connected to your criminal enterprise are forfeited to the United States government for victim compensation. This includes all real estate holdings, bank accounts, investments, jewelry, vehicles, and any other assets acquired through criminal proceeds. Lydia finally finds her voice, and what comes out is pure desperation. "Your Honor, this is persecution. I was protecting property values. I was trying to build a community. That mountain man destroyed everything with his lies and his federal conspirators." Even her attorney looks embarrassed as she spirals. "I demand a retrial. I demand an investigation into federal overreach." "Mrs. Ashcroft," Judge Williams interrupts, voice like ice. "You demanded many things over the past 3 years. You demanded your neighbors surrender their property rights. You demanded elderly residents pay illegal fees. You demanded government officials ignore the law to serve your interests." The judge leans forward, and the temperature seems to drop 10 degrees. "Today, I demand justice for your victims. Bailiff, remove the defendant." As federal marshals escort Lydia out, she turns toward the gallery, wild-eyed, until she finds me in the third row. "This isn't over, Cutter," she screams. "You think you won, but you've destroyed everything." Her voice cuts off as the courtroom doors close, leaving only the echo of her breakdown and the rapid clicks of camera shutters capturing the end of the Granite Ridge fraud queen's reign. Agent Reeves addresses the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the largest HOA fraud prosecution in U.S. history. Thanks to the courage of witnesses and cooperation of victims across multiple states, we've dismantled a criminal enterprise and recovered assets for full compensation." As we leave the courthouse, Roxanne rests a hand on my shoulder. "Ro, how does it feel to bring down a criminal empire?" I look up at the Colorado sky, breathe in air that smells like freedom and justice, and give her the only answer that matters. Feels like I can finally go home. The victory is sweet, but the real satisfaction isn't Lydia's fall. It's knowing that 43 families are getting their money back, corrupt officials are behind bars, and no other community will suffer what Granite Ridge Valley did. Justice served, mountain style. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my porch with real electricity, hot coffee, and the joy of watching the valley heal. The air carries the scent of wildflowers returning to meadows where Lydia's manicured lawns once suffocated the land. Nature has a way of reclaiming what's hers, given time and the absence of HOA landscaping tyrants. The asset forfeitures funded the largest victim compensation pool in Colorado history. Every family defrauded received full restitution plus damages. Elderly residents got their life savings back with interest. Young families who almost lost their homes are now debt-free. And the community that Lydia tried to divide has rebuilt itself stronger than ever. Silas Huckabee, my 73-year-old neighbor who first warned me about Lydia's intimidation tactics, stops by every morning now for coffee and what he calls victory breakfast. Today, he's grinning like a kid. Roe, did you see the news? Commissioner Thornfield got 8 years in federal prison. Judge said he violated the public trust and turned government into a criminal enterprise. Justice keeps tasting sweeter. Granite Ridge itself has been transformed from Lydia's environmental disaster into a model sustainable community. The EPA's cleanup restored natural water flows, removed contaminated soil, and placed permanent conservation easements. The 8 mansions that broke every environmental law are now renovated with solar panels, geothermal heating, and native landscaping. Most importantly, the new community operates as a voluntary homeowners association, with rotating leadership, transparent finances, and bylaws that would make constitutional lawyers weep. No mandatory fees, no architectural tyrants, no power-hungry dictators pretending to be community leaders. The real victory came 3 months ago when we established the Granite Ridge Community Foundation using a slice of the seized assets. The foundation funds college scholarships for local kids pursuing environmental science, supports habitat restoration across the valley, and runs a program close to my heart, the Mountain Veterans Retreat. Every month, combat veterans dealing with PTSD, depression, or the struggle of returning to civilian life spend a week at the cabin learning sustainable living, wilderness survival, and what my grandfather called the art of useful self-reliance. No corporate wellness speak, no group therapy, just honest work, mountains, and the peace that comes from chopping your own firewood and catching your own dinner. And it's funded entirely by Lydia's forfeited assets. Her criminal empire now pays for veterans to heal in the place she tried to destroy. Poetic justice doesn't get more perfect. Roxanne stops by this afternoon with news that makes the saga feel complete. Ro, remember those other HOA fraud schemes we uncovered? Federal prosecutors just announced indictments in Texas, Florida, and Arizona. Your case opened the floodgates. Victims who were too scared to speak before are now coming forward. She hands me a newspaper with a headline that makes me smile. Colorado Mountain Man's Stand Against HOA Tyranny sparks nationwide reform movement. You've become something of a folk hero, she says. Property rights groups are calling me the patron saint of homeowners fighting HOA abuse. The article mentions legislation introduced in 12 states to strengthen homeowner protections. Federal lawmakers are even considering the Cutter Act, which would require mineral rights notifications for all development projects and establish federal oversight of HOA finances. My 15 minutes of fame feel nice, but the real satisfaction is simpler. Tonight, the valley is quiet again. Just the sound of creek water tumbling over rocks, wind whispering through pine trees, and an owl calling somewhere in the dark. No generators powering harassment campaigns. No luxury vehicles rumbling up gravel roads to deliver threats. No clipboard-toting suburbanites photographing century-old cabins as environmental hazards. Just peace. Jake calls as I watch the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Ro, thought you'd want to know. Rex Sterling just got 12 years in federal prison. Judge said using a law license to enable organized crime was a special kind of betrayal. The final domino falls. But here's the best part. Prison officials assigned Lydia to work laundry detail. After 25 years of ordering people around, she's spending her days washing other inmates' clothes. Sometimes the universe has a wicked sense of humor. As I settle in for the evening, my phone buzzes with a message that stops me cold. It's from a combat veteran in Montana, someone I've never met, asking for advice about an HOA trying to force him off land his family's owned for generations. The story sounds familiar. Harassment campaigns, bogus fines, coordinated legal threats designed to break someone who just wants to be left alone. I pour myself another cup of coffee, fire up the laptop, and start typing a reply. Because if there's one thing I learned from this whole experience, it's that bullies only win when good people stay isolated and afraid. Granite Ridge Valley is healing. Justice has been served. Lydia Ashcroft is spending the rest of her life as a federal inmate. But the fight for property rights and community decency is bigger than one corrupt HOA queen and her criminal empire. Time to help the next mountain man stand his ground. Share your HOA nightmare stories in the comments. Let's make sure other communities never go through what Granite Ridge endured. And hit that subscribe button for more David versus Goliath justice stories that prove sometimes the little guy really can win. Remember, document everything. Know your rights, and never let suburban dictators turn your community into their personal kingdom. The law is on your side, even when it doesn't feel that way. Justice, mountain style. Case closed.